Welcome back to Literature Animation TV. Here, we bring you powerful stories and lessons that entertain, inspire, and teach. But before we dive into today's story, I've got something special for you. We've teamed up with Learning English is Fun with Teacher Fidelis, the best English teacher from Alliance Girls High School, an experienced examiner, and a dedicated English teacher. On her channel, you'll find amazing lessons on essay writing, functional writing, and grammar, with tips and examples that will sharpen your skills. I'll pin her channel link in the comments. So make sure to check it out, subscribe, and enjoy her exciting English lessons. Now, let's begin our story. Every city has its bright lights and its shadows. Beneath the bridges and behind the walls, forgotten lives struggle each day to survive. In Windhoek, one group of outcasts carved a home in the streets. They called themselves the Neighbourhood Watch, bound not by blood, but by hunger, loyalty, and the fight to see another day.
Elias woke the group roughly, shaking each of them awake. They started breakfast with yawns and stretches. Some of them even grumbled. After that, they folded their blankets and pieces of cardboard neatly. A can of water was passed around so they could wash their faces. Elias used it first, then Lazarus, Silas, and Omagano. By the time it reached Martin, the youngest and newest in the Neighborhood Watch, there was only a little left. When the can was empty, they hid it with their other small treasures in a secret place under the bridge. That spot under the bridge was valuable. It stayed dry when it rained, warmer during winter, and they had fought hard to keep it from rival groups. The big letters NW sprayed on the pillars were like a leopard's mark, warning others not to enter or they would face violence. Their hiding place was safe, protected by their reputation. According to their rules, stealing was not allowed. Thieves made life harder, because then everyone had to carry their few belongings all day and show their poverty in the open. No one liked a thief. The sky was still dark when they left. Elias, the oldest and leader, walked at the front with Lazarus beside him. Omagano walked behind, using her fingers to fix her hair. They were heading to town. Their clothes were old and torn, but they kept them neat so that police or guards would not notice them. If they walked slowly, no one on the road would smell them. Life on the street had already taken away their shame, but the smell of dirty bodies was something they still tried to hide. People could accept torn clothes, even in shops or churches, but a bad smell was hated everywhere. Elias was well known by the hotel and restaurant workers in town. They called him soldier or captain. Sometimes the workers gave him spoiled potatoes, very ripe mangoes, or soft carrots. On good days, when the workers felt kind, they gave him leftovers in containers, half-eaten burgers, fries covered in sauce, or salads that had gone soft. But most of the time, the workers had little to spare, keeping scraps for their own families. The real prize was always in the bins behind the buildings. In the early morning, when the air vents were steaming and the bins were full of last night's waste, the group sometimes found food still good to eat. But by noon, the hot sun turned the bins into piles of stinking rot. Elias, Lazarus, and Omagano walked faster. Timing was important. Elias coughed loudly, his chest shaking. Thick mucus came up, and he spat it to the ground. The cough was getting worse each day, sometimes with blood in it. But blood was common on the streets. Blood from the body, blood from fights, and Elias told them not to worry. His gray hair, unevenly cut, had been trimmed well enough by Omagano so that no one in town would look at him twice. Lazarus walked just behind Elias. His thin body was strong from many years on the street, his skin dark and tough. At first, his tattoos were hard to see, but if someone looked closely, they saw rough lines, badly drawn, more like scars than art. His sharp, ferret-like face was always alert, eyes moving quickly from bins to wall markings that showed rival territory. The city center was usually open to all groups, a shared place of scraps and leftovers, but sometimes young gangs tried to block others from using certain alleys. They even attacked old men searching in the trash. Still, no one dared to fight Lazarus. His presence alone could change the result of any fight. At the back walked Omagano. Hunger had made her thin, her collarbones sticking out under her small spaghetti-strap top. Sometimes the cloth pressed against her body, showing her figure, but she was still beautiful like the day she first joined the group. Children were the most wanted recruits, small, quick, and loyal when taken in young. After them came women. Some bins were guarded, with threats of beatings or demands for bribes, $10, sometimes $20 if the guards knew the garbage was rich. If Elias had money, he paid. If not, and food was needed fast, Omagano went behind a dumpster with a guard and gave what was asked. Elias, Lazarus, and Omagano were always the main ones to search for food. Silas and Martin had other jobs. They looked for old blankets, worn-out shoes, broken boxes, pieces of soap or toothpaste, pipes, wire, or anything that could burn. They stayed near construction sites and parking lots, waiting for useful things people left behind. Shopping trolleys were very valuable. If they found one alone, they quickly took it. Later, it could be traded for something good. If no one wanted it, they kept it under the bridge. They already had 3, which was enough. Too many would attract thieves and take up space. Silas, however, liked danger. He often discovered things that clearly belonged to someone, like cell phones. "Where did you get that?" Elias would ask. "Discovered it," Silas would reply, shrugging with a sly smile. Elias always warned him not to act like Christopher Columbus, and Lazarus often threatened him for stealing. But nothing stopped Silas. If he stole something valuable, everyone shared the profit. If he was caught, beaten, or arrested, then it was his own fault. Silas was short and thin, but anyone who knew the signs could see he was dangerous. He walked with pride, wore a mischievous grin, kept sharp eyes that never looked away, and his hands were always close to his pockets when trouble was near. Martin, the newest member, followed him closely, trying to learn the unspoken street rules. Martin had trouble keeping up. His trousers were too big and he had to pull them up every few steps. The big streets, tall buildings, and huge crowds of people still amazed him. Silas told him that with time, he would get used to it. The Neighborhood Watch later split into 2 groups and came back together in the afternoon. The food group showed what they found: half a loaf of brown bread, some salty mashed potatoes, soft grapes, and water. The valuables group brought newspapers, plastic pipes, and 2 old poor boy caps. Elias tried one cap, and Lazarus took the other. "Ausblick tonight," Elias said after they ate. "Get some sleep now." The heat of the day made the streets too hard to walk, but night was better and safer for scavenging. Ausblick was a suburb that still wasted plenty, so the long walk was worth it. If they reached the bins early, they might find broken appliances, parts from flat screens, or cooking pots that were old but still useful. Elias, Lazarus, and Silas would check the bins, pushing trolleys and looking for valuable items. But Ausblick was far, and distance was a problem as the city kept growing. The richer suburbs were further away, and more street groups were moving there to search the bins. Soon, Ausblick would be crowded like Olympia and Suderhof. Pioneers Park had already lost its value. It was now full of shouting men, barking dogs, and security vehicles, with people watching from behind their curtains. "Blairy Kafirs! Gone weg!" angry voices had once shouted from the shadows of those houses. Still, the Neighborhood Watch kept going. Ausblick die beste Vuilisblick. That suburb was still their prize, especially on Tuesdays and Thursdays. In the past, they had scavenged everywhere: Katutura, Hakahana, Goreangab, Wanaheda, and Okoriangava. but those places only gave spoiled food and broken things. Poor people's garbage was useless. Even abandoned babies there were worthless to them. That side of town had nothing good anymore. Elias remembered the early days. Hungry and desperate, he searched every bin he could, walking until his feet were full of blisters just to survive. Then, one night under a bridge with a burning drum for light, he asked Lazarus to join him. At first, Lazarus was unsure. He had been doing fine alone, and joining with an old man like Elias did not seem like a good idea. Winter was the real reason Elias and Lazarus became partners. The cold forced them to join. Together they could cover more places, and by dividing jobs, one looking for food, the other for essentials, they got more every day. The system worked. Lazarus also realized he liked Elias's company. The old man was quiet, not wasting words, though a little beer or brandy could make him talk a lot. Elias never feared Lazarus's prison tattoos. He had seen worse. The South African Defense Force in Angola, Coevote's armored trucks rolling north, bombs falling on Kasinga. Even now, he sometimes cried out in his sleep, haunted by those memories, until Lazarus shook him awake. They treated each other as equals, two men abandoned by their past groups. On the street, everyone carried secrets, but what mattered was the present. The street was always hungry. Regret and hope were things it quickly ate up. Elias taught Lazarus his first big lesson. The street has no future. There is only today, and today demands food, shelter, and survival. On garbage days, they searched every bin they could in Katutura, Hakahana, Goreangab, Wanaheda, and Okuriangava. But to Martin, Silas, and Omagano, those bins were empty and not worth the effort. When we started out, we weren't picky. We had to survive, Elias said. When you have to survive, you don't get to choose what you have to do, Lazarus added. Everywhere we went, everything we did. We had to survive, Jewel Ken, but you can't survive by being around people who are also trying to survive, Elias explained. All you'll get is whatever they don't need to survive, you see? You need to go where people have enough to throw away. Where there are white people. Where there are white people, Lazarus chuckled. Or black people trying to be white people. Then you can survive there. Remember when we found the baby? Lazarus asked, bringing back one of their old stories. They had once searched bins in areas where even family members lived, men with worn-out shoes, also struggling to survive. Elias had been desperate then, not choosing, always hungry, walking long, painful miles just to find a little food. That was before he asked Lazarus to join him, under a bridge lit by a burning drum. Lazarus had first refused. Why join an old man? But hunger forced them together. Elias's voice grew heavier. Usually in a bin, you have to be ready to find those things. Those things, women's things with blood on them, broken things. But this time we are food. Use condoms. Don't have a use, they get thrown away, nay? Amos fell to the ground. In that moment, everyone ran. On the streets, whether friend or stranger, there was one rule. Never stay near a dead body. A corpse always brought questions, and the police wanted answers fast. If you delayed, you got beaten with batons and shoved into their vans. By the time you were dropped in a cell, half the crime was already solved. The police hated paperwork more than crime itself. That was why people scattered. Even Elias and Lazarus ran, especially Elias and Lazarus. The police always suspected the dead man's friends first. Their questions came with kicks from steel boots. If they knew someone was innocent, they beat harder. But if someone admitted guilt, the beatings slowed, since no judge liked to see fresh wounds in court. Sometimes, when robberies increased or an important murder was unsolved, police offered a desperate person a deal. Take the blame. Jail at least meant food and shelter, sometimes even better treatment if the case was big. Maybe a single cell, better meals, or a friendly cellmate. A few people agreed. Life on the streets was not for everyone. Elias and Lazarus ran until they could not breathe, but the police caught them. Questioning began with beatings, and only later turned polite. For Elias, those beatings were worse than anything during the war, even worse than when the Afrikaners had captured him. Still, both men refused to change their story. Yes, they were there when Amos was stabbed. Yes, they ran because they were afraid. No, they did not see the attacker. No, they could not recognize anyone in photos. Could they say for sure, bleeding and battered as they were, that they had not killed Amos themselves for a few $100s, then thrown away the knife placed before them? Yes, they could. Because they stuck to their story, the police released them. Their freedom came with swollen eyes, broken ribs, and bruises that took days to heal. But still, it was worth it. Bones heal, wounds close, skin grows back. Only life never returns. Elias and Lazarus were lucky, but they never went back to Comesdal. They feared the real killer might think they wanted revenge. On Fridays and Saturdays, the crew stayed under the bridge they called headquarters. Elias had given it that name, a habit from his days in the struggle. To him, broken bottles and thorns were landmines. When someone needed a wound patched up, he joked it was time for a Tampax Tiffy. If food ran low, he laughed that it was time for the rats. Headquarters was their safest place on weekends, because those were the nights when police searched the streets for trouble, and fights were most common. Even Amos had died on a Friday night, but Silas could never resist sneaking out. He always tried to convince Martin to join him, but Lazarus stopped it. Martin was not allowed. If Silas wanted to go, he had to go alone, and if he got into trouble, no one would come looking. So Elias, Lazarus, Omagano, and Martin stayed at headquarters, passing time by talking about what they saw in the streets. They laughed at the men in Windhoek and Eros who stood by the road, hoping to be hired for small jobs. Painting, fixing windows, laying tiles, or installing sinks. They are too proud to be like us, Elias said, but they are the ones going home hungry every day. Pride is poor food, Lazarus added. But sometimes they can find a job, Martin said. They can, sometimes, Elias admitted. But they can find a job as often as we can find $20,000. How many times have we found $20,000? Martin frowned, thinking hard, which made Lazarus laugh. Idiot, he called him. Maybe things can get better for them, Martin said. Elias and Lazarus looked at each other. They knew that kind of hope. Hope was dangerous. It exposed you like footprints on the street, leading danger straight to your hiding place. Maybe as tomorrow, Lady, Lazarus said. And there is only today, Elias added. Today you need food. Today you need shelter. Today you need to take care of today. And tomorrow, Martin asked, making Omagano snort. Every day is today, Elias replied. Sundays were their best days. In Windhoek and Eros, the houses had high walls with dogs locked behind fences, and the bins were lined neatly along the pavements. These suburbs were treasure spots. The people there recycled carefully, putting paper, cans, bottles, and foil in separate bags. Some even washed their trash before throwing it away. Everything else went into the big green bins, which made scavenging faster and less disappointing. Best of all, these areas were close to headquarters, so the Neighborhood Watch did not have to go far from home. The brightest part of Eros was old Mrs. Bezwidenhout. In the evenings, she sat on her porch with her son, waiting for the Neighborhood Watch to pass. When she saw them pushing their trolley, she called out. They stopped at her gate while she went inside slowly, her cheeks moving in and out over her gums as her son watched her carefully. Then the gate opened a little, and she gave them a plastic bag, maybe cans of beans or peas, or 2 or 3 bananas. She had given them the scissors they used for haircuts, clothes that sometimes felt like a joke when they looked in the mirror. And in winter she knitted blankets and jerseys. She even gave them books they burned for fire, and rosaries they held in the night when only God and the streets were listening. For the Neighborhood Watch, 3 pillars kept them standing. Elias with his smart thinking, Lazarus with his strength, and Mrs. Bezwidenhout with her kindness. They would have fought every gang in Windhoek for her. Even Lazarus, who believed in nothing, admitted she was worth praying for, or praying to. She always asked how they were, and Elias answered for all of them. "On is okay, Mevrouw Bezwidenhout." Then she asked if they needed anything else. One time Silas wondered why Elias never asked her for soap, medicine, a toothbrush, or even a place to sleep in her garage since she was so generous. Elias only shook his head. "She gives, and we take, and we take. Soon she will not be here to give, but we will still need to take and take. She gives us something from her home and takes a little of the street away from us. But we need all of the street to survive the street. You understand now?" As the sun went down, the Neighborhood Watch began their rounds in Avis, searching the bins outside new apartment blocks. They passed joggers who looked away and dog walkers who held their leashes tighter. From there, they went into the steep streets of Klein Windhoek, where people were so wary that bins only came out at dawn, and some even locked their trash. Lazarus said that showed how far things had fallen. The rich had grown so rich, they were now protecting even their garbage. Then they searched every street of Eros, from Everest and Atlas to Drakensberg, from the Orange and the Okavango to the Kaiseb, from Amethyst to Topaz to Tourmaline. Streets named after mountains they would never climb, rivers they would never see, gemstones they would never touch. They moved like wildebeest chasing rain, while the street followed them in return, always hungry. They always saved Mrs. Bezwidenhout's street for last. They longed for her kindness, but they also feared the day she would no longer be there to give, while they would still need to take. A day when the street would ask more from them than they could handle. On those nights, after finishing Eros, they broke their own rule. They thought about more than today. They thought about yesterday, and worse, they thought about tomorrow.